was called the world's first pregnant man, and today he gave birth.
But the court has gone the whole way, said there is an absolute constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Hurricane Harvey is pelting the Texas coastline.
There is an increasing attack on freedom of religion, speech, and
Welcome to the Issachar Hour, examining law, policy, and culture through the lens of the Judeo-Christian worldview to help you understand the times and know what you ought to do.
Good day, good morning, good evening, and welcome to the Issachar Hour. My name is Wayne West, and this is my wife, Doreen. We just celebrated our wedding anniversary. If I were to tell you, you would think that I married her when she was still in the crib. So I won't go into that, but I just want to say happy anniversary again. And we want to welcome you to the Issachar Hour once more.
Yes. Welcome to the Issachar Hour. And the viewers may derive some benefit from knowing the length of the time we've been married, actually. So it's 37 years and a few days.
Well, I didn't want to say it because, ladies tend to protect their ages.
But that has to do with my age.
I
think there's a benefit in saying it to the public to attest to the value of the institution of marriage for society. Yeah. So there's a value to saying it.
Yeah,
so
we give God
37 years.
We give God thanks for that. Because we put him at the center of all that we have to do. God is at the center of it, and then we work with him and work with each other. What are we doing today? We are looking at the Christian Manifesto, which was a lecture and a book actually written by Francis Schaeffer, and a lecture that he gave. And we want him to say a lot more this week than he has in the last two programs. So we'll be looking at the Christian Manifesto, which is a response to the Humanist Manifesto. There are three versions of the Humanist Manifesto. And we will speak a little bit about this third version subsequently. But in observing the effect of the Humanist Manifesto and the fact that judges in the United States and other countries were actually legislating the Humanist Manifesto, way back in 1982, Francis Schaeffer recognized that Christians had to respond to this political and legal process of legislating secularism on the society.
Wouldn't you say that Francis Schaeffer actually was berating to some degree the Christian community and saying that they had dropped the ball?
Well, he made that point very clear.
So that things should not have gotten to where they had in fact reached in America.
And we will hear him say so in his own words as well. One of the things, as we will hear Francis Schaeffer say, we're just going to give you a little things to look out for in the videos that will be coming up, because we want him to speak to you as much as possible. Francis Schaeffer recognized that if, as the Secular Humanist Manifesto indicates, that human beings are the result of evolution, not the result of creation by being,
an infinite personal being,
who had purpose for the universe and who has a plan. So therefore you can say this is the way the universe ought to be, meaning that there is a concept of morality which is transcendent. It arises from beyond human beings. It comes from God, and it is because God has a purpose for the universe that the concept of morality, which is about what people ought to do, that morality will come from God. But if there is no transcendent, as the secular humanists who tend to be atheists say, then everything is relative. And Schaeffer recognized that this worldview leads inevitably to relativism, meaning that there is no right or wrong. It all depends on what you want.
What you want, and it depends on who has the power wants.
That's right.
Because for sure, if there is no transcendent moral law, then every man may and will do what is right in his own eyes, and that will lead to chaos. So powerful men then decide what ought to be done by everyone. This is the heart of it. There's going to be no world where every man may do as he wishes. We see that even now. Powerful men will tell other men what they must do.
Yeah.
And so this is what will come out of that situation of relativism. The powerful will take the authority and say, this is what must be done. So we have to be very aware.
This is exactly what happened in communism. You know. This is what happened in communism. The communists took power. They were atheists and they imposed their power on Christians and other religious people and denied you the opportunity.
And this is what must happen.
Inevitably.
Inevitably.
Yeah.
Must be done.
So Schaeffer, way back then, recognized that the courts were being used by the movers and shakers, the power, and also because the judges themselves had the bias. Many of them had that political and philosophical bias, was being used to impose this new worldview.
Make secular humanism the foundation for public policy. That is it.
So we're gonna let Francis Schaeffer speak to you about that. We come to the first video. Listen carefully to what he has to say. Listen to what he says about the courts. And take note that we in the Caribbean are already experiencing it from the decision of judges like Justice Kenneth Benjamin and Justice Devendra Rampersad in Trinidad and Tobago and Justice Kenneth Benjamin in Belize. We've seen that happening. So look at Francis Schaeffer.
There's no possible way to heal the relativistic thinking of our own day if indeed all there is a universe out there that is silent about any values. None whatsoever. It is not possible. It is a loss of values and there's a loss of freedom, which we may be sure will continually grow. A good illustration is in the public schools. This view is taught in our public schools exclusively by law. There's no other view that can be taught. I'll mention it a bit later. But by law, there is no other view that can be taught. By law, in the public schools of the United States of America in 1982, legally there is only one view of reality that can be taught. And that is that the final reality is only material energy shaped by pure chance. It is the same with the television programs. Public television gives us many things that many of us like culturally, but is also completely committed to a propaganda position that the last reality is only material or energy shaped by pure chance. Clarke's Civilization, Bronowski, The Ascent of Man, Carl Sagan, Cosmos, they all say it. The new one that's on says it with great dogmatism. There is only one final view of reality that's possible, and that is that final reality is material or energy shaped by pure chance. It's about us on every side, and especially the government, and especially the courts, have become the vehicle to force this anti-God view on the total population. It's exactly where we are. The abortion ruling is a very clear one. The abortion ruling, of course, is also a natural result of this other worldview, because with this other worldview, human life, your individual life, has no intrinsic value. You are a wart upon the face of an absolutely impersonal universe. Your aspirations have no fulfillment in the what-isness of what is. Your aspirations damn you. And many of the young people who come to us understand this very well, because their aspirations of humanness have no fulfillment if indeed the final reality is only material or energy shaped by pure chance. The universe cannot fulfill anything that you say when you say it is beautiful. I love. It is right. It is wrong. These words are meaningless words against the backdrop of this other worldview. So what we find is the abortion case should not have been a surprise, because it boiled up out of, quite naturally, I would use the word again, mathematically, this other worldview. In this case, human life has no distinct value whatsoever. And we find that the Supreme Court, in one ruling, overthrew the abortion laws of all 50 states. And they made this form of killing human life, because that's what it is. The law declared that this form of killing human life was to be accepted. And for many people, because they had no set ethic, when the Supreme Court said that it was legal, for many people in the intervening years it has become ethical. The courts of this country have forced this view and its results on the total population. What we find that as the courts have done this, without any longer that which the Founding Fathers comprehended of law, a man like Blackstone with his commentaries understood, the other of the lawgivers of this country in the beginning, and that is that there is a law of God upon which gives foundation. When the courts of this country cut themselves loose from the law of God, it becomes quite natural then that they would also cut themselves loose from a strict constructionism concerning the Constitution. Everything is relative. So as you cut yourself loose from the law of God in any concept whatsoever, you also soon are cutting yourself loose from a strict constructionism, and each ruling is to be seen as an arbitrary choice by a group of people as to what they may honestly think is for the sociological good of the community, of the country, for the given moment. Now, along with that is the fact that the courts are increasingly making law, and thus we find that the legislature's powers are increasingly diminished in relationship to the power of the courts. Now, the pro-abortion people have been very wise about this in the last, say, 10 years, and Christians very silly. And I wonder sometimes where we've been, because the pro-abortion people have used the courts for their end rather than the legislatures, because the courts are not subject to the people's thinking nor their will, either by election nor by a re-election. Consequently, the courts have been the vehicle that has been used to bring this whole view and to force it on our total population. It has not been largely the legislatures. It has been rather the courts.
Now, Schaeffer correctly identifies the reality that the courts in the United States and other places are challenged because they are imposing the secular humanist manifesto. We're not saying that they necessarily meet in a room and sit down and say, we are going to do this. But what happens is that the secular humanist, the atheist perspective, is present in education and in many places. And it becomes sort of like the default, what the persons in law, like in the faculty of law in various places, may teach. So judges eventually start ruling that way. And because this worldview is not challenged, and not only not challenged, it's not allowed to be challenged by legal rulings, like in the United States, as he mentioned in one state, 76% of the persons wanted creation and evolution to be taught in school, and the judicial system said, no, you cannot teach creation in school. Now, why shouldn't creation be taught? It is a legitimate scientific theory to say that we believe that all that we see was created by an intelligent agent. What you need to do now is to go out and find the evidence to support it. It is a hypothesis.
Or the evidence against it.
Or the evidence against it. There is nothing wrong with that. That is the way science works.
And evolution is the same.
And evolution is the same thing. But the judges say you cannot teach that. So the courts are being used to suppress the truth and to suppress a different perspective. Now, we speak about the Secular Humanist Manifesto, the third, what should I call it? The third version of this manifesto. The first, it really consists of 6 points. And we will tell you the points. I'll give you 3 at a time, and we'll come back to them. The first one is that knowledge of the world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. In other words, empiricism. Now, that sounds very good. And it is the scientific methodology. But it means that a claim is being made that one can only acquire knowledge through science.
Right.
And that
So
only a knowledge acquired through science is
true.
valid. But there is no scientific
proof of that
statement. So the secular humanists are making a statement about science and truth,
which science has not shown to be true.
which science has not shown to be true.
Right, yes. So
Talk about that a little bit.
yeah.
Talk about
that's
that.
true. They're saying, well, they say knowledge is gained, and the implication is that that is the only way you can get knowledge.
Yes,
That
empiricism.
all knowledge is gained in that way.
That's right.
All knowledge is gained by the scientific method.
By the scientific.
No.
And can only be gained by the scientific
And
method.
that is the only route to gaining knowledge is the scientific method.
But has the scientific method demonstrated that?
Absolutely not. The scientific method indeed cannot demonstrate that, and it has not demonstrated that. So that statement itself is not a scientific statement.
It's a nonsense statement.
It's a leap of faith. But we
No,
have
no,
to say,
it's
though,
a nonsense statement.
well, okay, but we have to say that some knowledge can be gained that way. A lot of knowledge can be
Important
gained that
knowledge.
way. Important
Some
knowledge can be
gained.
gained and is gained that way.
That way, yes.
So we're not denying that. So we're not saying that, oh, the scientific method has no value.
It has great
immense
value. It has immense
And
value.
we are all beneficiaries of that.
Absolutely.
It has gained immense value by the scientific method,
Yeah.
right? Which is subject to review and repeatability and
Yeah.
all of that. Very good. Absolutely true.
Yeah.
But the implication that is the only way to acquire knowledge is where the problem arises. Because science has not shown that,
Yeah.
because that itself is a statement of faith.
It
So in
makes-
other words, the statement that knowledge can only be gained through the scientific method is a mark what we call scientism. It's faith.
Yeah.
It's a faith statement because science has not shown that.
And the point to be made is that every statement has some assumptions built into it.
Absolutely.
Now, if one assumes that all that there is the natural universe, if you assume that, then it may be correct to say
All knowledge.
that all knowledge would come from
But the
empiricism.
assumption itself must be questioned.
But
because what is the basis of that assumption?
What is the basis for that
That
assumption?
assumption has not been proven by science and cannot be proven
And
by
cannot be
science.
proven. And can that assumption be true based on some scientific observation? The answer to that is no, because science by definition is limited to
the material
investigating the natural
Observable
material
material
world.
world.
So the secular humanist manifesto, the very first point on the secular
It's a
humanist
statement of faith,
is a statement of faith which cannot
which claims to put in science as a basis of everything,
Yeah.
but it itself is a statement of
Of
faith.
faith.
This is the deception of it.
we need to repeat this, because judges are legislating based on these assumptions. Doctors are changing up medicine based on these assumptions. The law is being altered based on this first statement. Let me just read it again of the secular humanist manifesto is that knowledge of the world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. In other words, they are suggesting that the only way we can know of the world is through the scientific methodology. We appreciate that the scientific method has immense value.
Especially if it's rigorously applied without
Yeah.
any worldview interruption
That's
into
right.
it.
Yeah.
It's very valid and very strong.
That's how we have planes and
Everything.
boats and cell phones
health.
and so on. But
not
it is
all.
but the assumption that all there is the natural world, which
Just
is
statement
all
of
that the
faith.
scientific method can investigate, is a statement of faith. It is not a scientific statement.
Cannot be.
So the first statement of the scientific method manifesto is a philosophical statement.
It's a philosophy.
It's a belief
It's a
statement.
belief
It
statement.
is not a statement
It is not a statement
of science, not at all.
at all. Right.
But because of it, and let's take a look at the second statement. Or the second statement is that humans are an integral part of nature, the result of evolutionary change and unguided process.
Unguided.
An unguided process. Now, this is another statement
Of
which,
faith.
this statement can be rebutted using the scientific method. Because the scientific method says that scientific fact must be empirically verified. What do you mean by empirically verified? This empirically verified means it must be demonstrated to be so. Now, you can come to an observation and then do a deductive process to make a theory. So Darwin, for example, saw that animals change, He said, well, over a long period of time, those changes would be gradual and they would give rise to completely new species. Now, that's a deductive process, and his theory was based on that extrapolation of his observation. So let me just tell our listeners, the theory of evolution, as articulated by Charles Darwin, came about as a deductive process. In other words, he came to a conclusion based on observations. And then based on the observation, he said, this is what is likely to have occurred. That small changes in living organisms over a long time gave rise to the diversity of life. That statement, to become fact, scientific fact, must be verified by observation.
And it has not been.
That statement has not been verified by observation. The fossil record refutes it. There is no gradual change in organisms to give rise to new organisms.
There's sudden appearance and sudden disappearance of species.
The fossil record indicates that suddenly organisms appear, they remain stable, and then they become extinct. That is called stasis. And as a result of that observation, other evolutionary biologists like Gould, I think it is Stephen Gould, came up with the concept of what they call punctuated equilibrium. What they meant by that is that just how the fossil record show that living organisms appeared, remained stable, and then they became extinct. So Darwin's concept of gradualism was falsified.
Nevertheless, the secular humanist manifesto states that as its second statement. So the first statement makes science the God.
Yeah.
And the second statement says man came about through evolution.
Through an evolutionary process.
Which the science, which is elevated in the first statement, refutes. So that's
so the scientific.
So the first two and the second two cannot be together.
They claim that science is their big reference.
Yes.
But then
the second statement, science
does not support the second one, because the concept that organisms came here by an evolutionary process has not been scientifically verified.
And in fact has been refuted by scientific.
It has been, in fact, the scientific method says that if a scientific theory is falsified in one,
you have to go back to the drawing.
It's falsified, full stop.
Right.
And Darwin made that point. He said, if
we do not find
these gradual changes,
then my theory is gone.
And gradualism, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, anyone listen to our voice, the evolutionary theory has been falsified. It has not only been falsified because gradualism is not true. You will not go into the fossil record and find that organisms have evolved gradually into different
intermediate forms.
What the fossil record would show is living organisms appear, stasis, and then they become extinct. No, you will not find that. Not only so it has been falsified, gradualism. Secondly, it has not been empirically verified. No evolutionary biologist anywhere in the world can cite a single instance of an organism evolving from one to another completely different organism and the mechanism by which these transitions will occur.
Right.
So this secular humanist manifesto, its first 2 points
contradict each other.
They are nonsense.
Right.
We use the word. They are nonsense.
Okay.
Points.
So you see now why Schaeffer was so concerned.
Yes.
Because Schaeffer is saying that Darwin's theory of evolution is absolutely essential, it's critical, and it's indispensable to the atheist secular humanist point of view, because it is built on it. If the theory goes, that goes, because it is built on it. It is indispensable to it. And this is the point that he's making, and he's saying that in spite of that, he says it's a false view of reality.
It's a nonsense view of reality.
He's saying that this false view of reality has been allowed to come into education, government, and the courts, and medicine, and everything, and to change society, to totally redo the fabric of society. So you should go to the third point.
So we are building the new social order on nonsense.
On false view of reality.
The first two statements are not, the first one is not scientific. The first one says science is the basis for their truth, and it's not a scientific statement. It's at best a philosophical statement, but it's a statement that has no basis for fact. And the other one of evolution, again, is not scientific. It has been falsified and it has not been empirically verified. So we are looking really at a nonsense document being used as the basis for social organization in Western society. The third item here is that ethical values are derived from human need and interests as tested by experience. No, I don't know what that means.
That means when ethical values speak again to right and wrong, what we ought and what we ought not to do.
Yeah.
So they are saying that the categories of what you ought and ought not to do derive from human need
and experience.
And human experience.
As tested, human need and interest.
Human need and human
So
interest.
ethical values are derived from human need and interest.
As tested by experience.
No, this, what it means? If you eat people and that is your experience, that eating people becomes good?
It means that what you ought to do, what you ought not to do are not standard, are not universal.
Yeah.
What you need comes in there, right?
Yeah.
Your needs, your desires, and then the experience of living that way validates or does not validate those values.
Again,
that's what I mean.
This third point is as ridiculous as the first two, but it's even more dangerous because what it is saying is that the decision-making process for ethics, what should be, what is good, is to be determined by your experience. Now,
human need.
Suppose you are mentally ill.
They say by human need.
By human need and experience. Let us quote it correctly.
As tested by experience.
Ethical values are derived from human need and interest. As tested by experience. Now, suppose you thought that you were Queen Nefertiti. That was your experience as a mentally ill person. Or as some people are having their experiences now as mentally ill person, that they are men in women's bodies and women in men's body, and people who think they are dragon and something they are cats and something. All of this transgender nonsense is coming from these things. People have to recognize that if you are going to define ethical values based on how people feel and their interests, and you throw out an external standard of reality, then, as WHO, the World Health Organization, just recently said, if you think, if I think, look at me as that I am a female, I am a woman with a prostate, then the world and medicine has to accept that, because WHO, basing medicine on this sort of nonsense now, is saying that I can identify as a woman looking exactly the way I look and dressing the way I am. So you see, this is the third principle in the company.
And that third one must inevitably give rise to a completely relativistic value system. Because my human need, human interest, as tested by experience, but still that gives rise to a totally relativistic value system.
Absolutely.
No universal right or wrong, no absolute right or wrong. And so this now is going to lead into what Schaeffer is talking about, the horror of abortion. Because if ethical value is determined by human need
and interest,
human interest, then you're going to see how that will run out into the matter of the value of life and the sanctity of life and so on.
We promised to let Schaeffer say a lot today.
And we have not let him say
but you see, when this system and the courts, this system of thinking, this illogical system of thinking, way of thinking, combined with the judicial authority, and they start imposing it, and you see the consequence. So let Schaeffer tell us a little bit about what happens in America
the value system
and the tyranny in America, and that parents wanted something, and yet still the courts, usually one or two judges, when they say the courts is one or two judges, impose this illogic on the population.
The result is a relativistic value system, a lack of any final meaning to life. A lack of any final meaning to life, that's first. Why does human life have any value at all? If that is all the reality is. If not only you're going to die individually, but the whole human race is going to die. Someday, and it need not take the falling of the atom bombs, but someday the world will grow too hot, too cold, that's what we're told, on this other final reality. And someday, all you people, not only will be individually dead, but the whole conscious life on this world will be dead. And nobody will see the birds fly. And there's no meaning to life. And as you know, I don't speak academically, shut off in a scholastic cubicle as it is. I have lots of young people and older ones come to us and from the end of the earth. And as they come to us, they have gone to the end of this logically, and they're not living in a romantic setting. They realize what the situation is. They can't find any meaning to life. It's the meaning of the black poetry. It's the meaning of the black plays. It's the meaning of all this. It's the meaning of the words of punk rock. And I must say that on the basis of what they're being taught in school, that the final reality is only this material thing, they're not wrong. They're right. They're not wrong. They're right. On this other basis, there is no meaning to life. And not only there is no meaning to life, but there is no value system that is fixed. And we find that the law is based then only on a relativistic basis, and that law becomes purely arbitrary. And this is brought to bear specifically and perhaps most clearly in the public schools, I'll come to that now, in this country, in the courts of this country, saying that it's absolutely illegal. It's absolutely illegal from the lowest grades up through university for the schools, the public schools of this country, to teach any other worldview except this worldview of final material or energy. Now, this is done no matter what the parents may wish. This is done regardless of what those who pay the taxes for their schools may wish. I'm giving an illustration as well as making a point. The way the courts force their view, and this view of the false view of reality, on the total population, no matter what the total population wants. We find that in the January 18th, just recently, Time magazine, there was an article that said that there was a poll that pointed out that about 76% of the people in this country thought it would be a good idea to have both creation and evolution taught in the public schools. I don't know if the poll was accurate, but assuming that the poll was accurate, what does it mean? It means that your public schools are told by the courts that they cannot teach this, even though 76% of the people in the United States want it taught. I'll give you a word. It's tyranny. There is no other word that fits at such a point.
So in that video, Francis Schaeffer expressed his concern about the tyranny of the courts as they impose this new worldview on the United States. Now, he's speaking about the United States, he's American, he's talking about the US experience. But this same experience is happening around the world. It's happening in the Caribbean. Okay? He cited the example that 76% of parents wanted something, the courts decided no. And he said this is tyranny. And it is tyranny. But the danger of this thing is that it is not even a tyranny for something that's sensible. Or good. It is tyranny for something which is whispered, which never comes out into the public for open debate, but which has become a part of the education system, a part of the legal system, and a part of medicine as well. And we want to just recap, to list the other items in this Humanist Manifesto, which really is not what the paper is written on, because it's an internally incoherent document. What do we mean?
You may say that, but the large entire areas of certainly the social life of Western democracies are based on that exact manifesto. That is what is being worked out, being imposed as public policy in Canada, in America, in the UK. Yeah. This is what is being imposed. So you may think it's not worth the paper. You may be right.
But I know it's not worth the paper.
But, be that as it may, entire large areas of social life, of the social order of these Western democracies are being carried out based on those.
And you're quite right. You know, in computing, there's the thing garbage in,
GIGO.
Garbage in, garbage out. So when you see Western democracies making garbage laws, because when WHO and other Western democracies start telling you that Caitlyn Jenner is the woman of the year, this is a man.
It wasn't WHO that said it, was Vanity Fair.
Vanity Fair said so. And
WHO said she's quite normal.
And President Obama was
she's brave.
Said she was
and
brave.
WHO said she's normal.
No, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thinkers, when you see foolish things happening, it's because the
garbage has gone in.
Because garbage has
and
gone.
Garbage is coming out.
Garbage has gone into the programming, and garbage is coming out of the legal system and the activist judges and the policy
Education
makers.
system.
So we already pointed out some of the garbage from the Humanist Manifesto. Here are the other things that sound good. Now, these other three things sound quite good. It says, life's fulfillment emerges from individual participation in the service of humane ideas. Now, this sounds excellent. It sounds perfect. It sounds wonderful. The catch in it, and as always, everything that leaves God out cannot be what we call internally coherent. Meaning, coherent means that parts make sense when analyzed with respect to other parts. Why should
fulfillment? Why should anyone take any part in the humane ideas? Why should if evolution is how we got here?
Yeah.
What does it matter? Why should we follow the humane ideas? Why should I be humane at all? If I want to cook my neighbor for dinner, why on earth shouldn't I? Because we just heard in the last one that ethical values are based on human need and human interest. So let us say I look at my neighbor and I decide that will make a tasty morsel for a curry dish. And that is my interest, that is my need. Yeah. Curry neighbor is what I need for dinner today.
Yeah.
And evolution is what rules. Why on earth shouldn't I go and curry my neighbor? No reason at all. Because ethical values, in this case, what I ought or ought not to do, are based on my need and my interest. And let us say I ate another neighbor last year and the experience was a fulfilling one.
And we had an experience with somebody who had some sexual desire to eat people.
So let us say I ate a neighbor last year. It was a fulfilling experience. And this year I said, well, no, the other neighbor on the other side, let me eat that one, maybe cooked in a different way. But nevertheless, the ethical values are based on my need, my interest, and my experience. Yeah. That's tested by my experience. Yeah. So why on earth, if that is true, why should I worry or care about following humane ideals? What does humane have to do with evolutionary process? It has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Because
it's nonsense.
Lions, for example.
It's incoherent.
Lions, when a male lion takes over a pride, what it does, it goes and kills all the cubs
of the previous alpha male.
Because absolutely. What happens that when he does that,
the female goes into heat immediately, and he can pass on his genes.
The black widow spider, after she has mated with the male, she kills the male, and the male's body becomes food for the day.
That is it.
Evolution has no right or wrong,
because it has no purpose behind it. It has no objective.
That's right.
No. These are the objectives that we want to reach. Yeah. This is the purpose. Evolution. It said unguided. The same manifesto mentioned unguided process. If it is unguided, how on earth can humane ideals come into it?
Suppose evolution makes you quote unquote humane, but makes me
not humane,
inhumane.
So
who is right? This document is not worth the paper it's written on. It sounds good, but it is only sensible. Humane ideas are only sensible
if there's a purpose, overarching purpose.
If there is a transcendent, overarching
and if evolution is true, there is no overarching purpose. Therefore, being humane has no meaning whatsoever.
This statement would have been in the context of Christ saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Speaking from the point of view of a God who wants people to live in a particular way.
And not only that, but of human beings made in the image of that God. But without those two, it's nonsense. It makes no point.
Now, this was the fourth item, because there's 6 items. The fifth one says humans are social by nature and find meaning in relationship. Again, this sounds good.
Then you could just give so what? You could just say so what? Evolution will say so what?
No, this may be what we observe to be true in nature, and that may well be true. But keeping in mind that the previous statements, item 2, is that humans are the result of evolutionary change. Suppose evolutionary change is starting in my neighbor or in me, and the change is now that human beings are no longer to live socially the way they did before, but are to live more like lone rangers, the way tigers live.
As someone said, in some cultures, they tell their neighbors good morning. In other cultures, they eat them for breakfast. Yes, What is the difference? There is no difference if evolution is true.
The thing is,
it's purely a matter of personal taste. Whether you want to be humane or not.
This thing is piggybacking on theism.
It is stealing. We have a book called Stop Thief, because these good sounding things are
yeah.
stealing
From
the
theism.
foundation of the Judeo-Christian worldview,
Yeah.
with there being an overarching purpose,
Yeah.
an infinite personal creator, and man made in the image of God. It's stealing those foundations
Yeah.
to put out this claptrap,
Yeah.
which cannot cohere, cannot exist coherently with the first three.
It can't.
Cannot.
It can't.
And it does not.
You know, people use big words, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, those who are listening to it. There's a concept of a meta-narrative. Meta-narrative
An
means
overarching
an
big
overarching story.
Yeah.
The Bible's meta-narrative is in the beginning.
God created.
God created heaven. And then God made the world
Man
in
in
a
his image.
particular way.
Made animals after their kind.
And he
made
said it was
man-
good.
and
He said it was good.
And
There
made
was,
man in his
there
image.
was order, and it was good.
It was very
and
good.
it was good. That's the biblical meta-narrative. The secular humanist meta-narrative is that
Unguided.
in the beginning,
Nothing.
there was nothing, which made everything
By an unguided
by an
process.
unguided process to no end,
To no end.
because it has no objective.
No purpose.
Now, if there is no purpose, how could being humane be a purpose?
And what does it matter about finding meaning in relations?
You know, the Bible speaks of intelligence as being in darkness.
Darkness.
And what we are seeing here, because a lot of very bright people follow this nonsense, you know, and they say it's intelligent and rational,
But they're stealing. They're stealing.
but they are stealing.
The foundation.
The fact of the matter is, in a universe where organisms, including men and women, come about by an unguided process, there is no
Purpose and meaning cannot exist.
there is no greater value to having human beings on the face of the earth
Or not.
or maggots.
And it's a matter of personal taste whether you say good morning to your neighbor or have them for breakfast.
The fact of the matter,
Simply personal
the
taste.
fact of the matter, the maggots who are as likely and as have every right to be here as human beings would prefer to be here than having human beings. If evolution
The
is
unguided
the
process.
meta-narrative, then being humane is an illusion.
Meaningless.
Meaningless. So this humanist manifesto, which our judges are seeking to impose on us, is a nonsense piece.
Garbage in.
It is a nonsense piece. It is garbage in and garbage out. And so we are finding that you have trans-ageism, where a 59-year-old man,
Says he's a 6-year-old girl.
and now that is supposed to be
Normal.
sophisticated, intelligent, and if you don't accept it, you belong to the Bronze Age, when people were at least sensible.
And you male from female.
Uh,
Male anatomy from female anatomy.
And so-
And you a man from a
Yeah.
different from a little girl. Yeah. So.
So we are in a phase, we are in a position now where illogic and irrationality and
Garbage.
incoherence and garbage is being made the basis of law and public policy. And so we see as videos 3 and 4, we're going to show you two other videos. One deals
How it works
with-
out in the medical system.
That's right. One deal, once you start killing babies, you got to start killing adults. So euthanasia and suicide.
And really and truly, if we got here by an unguided process,
Yeah.
and if our ethical values are based on human desire and human interest,
Yeah.
then nothing can be wrong with any of those
None of those
things.
things. Yes. And-
That's a fact.
Yeah. You will hear Francis Schaeffer recognizing that the German Supreme Court is reticent to call abortion a human right because they knew, nothing like walking the path. They knew that if you start devaluing human life, then where is
That
it going
road
to
has
end?
no end.
Where is it
That
gonna
slippery
end?
slope has no
Has no
end.
end.
So yes, so the first of the two videos talks about killing people.
Killing people.
That this kind of worldview, this kind of thinking, this view of reality
Yeah.
applied in the medical profession, which previously said, how can I help to save this life?
Because at that time, the medical worldview worked in the
That man is
Judeo-Christian
made in the
worldview.
image of
That
God.
man is made
So
in
the
the image
question
of
in
God.
medicine then is, how can I save this life?
Yeah.
And by discarding God from the whole equation, then the question became, why should I save this
Why
life?
should I-
Should I save this life?
That's right.
And now we've gone even further to say, what is the best way to take this life?
That's right.
To kill this
That's
life?
right.
To destroy this
That's
life?
right.
So the first of the two videos shows you how this thing merges imperceptibly and inevitably
Yeah.
into abortion, infanticide,
Yeah.
euthanasia, all of those things, because if we no longer hold that man is made in the image of God. There is no God in whose image man can be made.
Yeah.
Man got here like the other animals by an unguided process. Therefore, it's every man for himself.
Yeah.
And if I am pregnant and I need to go on a vacation,
Yeah.
and ethical values are determined by my interests,
Yeah.
and my need, I need to go on a vacation. Hello, and my interest, and there's a baby in my womb. Get that baby out.
Of course.
By any means necessary, discard it.
Of course.
That's it.
Utilitarianism. That's utilitarianism.
Ethical values from human need and human interest. That's utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism.
And there is no end to that slippery slope.
Yeah.
So the first of the two videos shows you that aspect of it. And the second one continues in the same vein to talk about assigning personhood. Deciding who's a person and who's not.
Well, that was the sleight of hand that the feminists used in order to kill. You know, from the time the egg and the sperm come together,
that's a human
life.
They can't deny it. Biologically,
so if you're going to kill people, you got to say they're not persons. Yeah. So therefore you say it's a human being, it's human life. But is it a person? Yeah. Of course, the American Supreme Court in 1859 said Dred Scott was
two-thirds, right?
Two-thirds of a person. Okay. In other words, once people need, desire, and experience become the basis for public policy.
And the courts take it on.
Undesirables will be defined as either non-being persons.
So whether they are babies or Jews or Tutsis or Hutus or black people or whatever.
The problem is we have judges passing these laws, and that is what we have to keep our eyes on.
So let's look at the videos.
At such a point. And at the same time, we find the medical profession has radically changed. Dr. Koop, in our seminars for Whatever Happened to the Human Race, often said that speaking himself, when I graduated from medical school, the idea was, how can I save this life? But for a great number of the medical students now, it's not how can I save this life, but should I save this life? Believe me, it's everywhere. It isn't just abortion, it's a fanticide. It's allowing the babies to starve to death after they're born if they do not come up to some doctor's concept of a quality of life worth living. And I just say in passing, and never forget it, it takes about 15 days often for these babies to starve to death. And I'd say something else that we haven't stressed enough. In abortion itself, there is no abortion method that is not painful to the child. Just as painful that month before birth as the baby you see in one of these cribs down here at IPAS a month after the birth. Just as painful. So what we find then is that the medical profession has largely changed. Not all doctors. I'm sure there are doctors here in the audience who feel very, very differently. Who feel indeed that human life is important and you wouldn't take it easily, wantonly. But in general, we must say, and all you have to do is look at the TV programs, all you have to do is to hear about the increased talk about the euthanasia, allowing the mongoloid child, the child with the Down syndrome, to starve to death if it's born this way. Increasingly, we find on every side the medical profession has changed its views. The view now is this life worth saving? I look at you. You're an older congregation than I'm usually used to speaking to. You better think, because this means you. It does not stop with abortion and infanticide. It stops with the question, what about the old person? Is he worth hanging on to? Is he worth hanging on to? Should we, as they're doing in England in this awful organization, Exit, teach older people to commit suicide? Should we help them get rid of them because they're an economic burden, a nuisance? I want to tell you, once you begin chipping away in the medical profession at the intrinsic value of human life, founded upon the Judeo-Christian concept that man is unique because he is made in the image of God, and his value is not because he's well, strong, a consumer, a sex object, or any other thing. His value is intrinsic because he is unique in the universe as made in the image of God. That is where whatever compassion this country has, and certainly it's far from perfect and it's never been perfect, nor out of the Reformation has there been a golden age, but whatever compassion there's ever been, it's rooted in the fact that our culture knows that man is unique as made in the image of God. Take it away, and I just say gently, the stopper is out of the bathtub for all human life. The January 11 Newsweek has an article about the baby in the womb. The first 5 or 6 pages are marvelous. If you haven't seen that, you should dig it, see if you can get that issue. It's January 11th, and about the first 5 or 6 pages shows conclusively what every biologist has known all along, and that is human life begins at conception. There is no other time for human life to begin except at conception. Monkey life begins at conception. Donkey life begins at conception. And human life begins at conception. Biologically, there's no discussion. Never should have been. From a scientific viewpoint, I'm not speaking a religious, no. And this 5, 6 pages, very carefully, goes into the fact that human life begins at conception. But you flip the page, and there's a big black headline, but is it a person? But is it a person? And I'll read the last sentence. The problem is not determining when actual human life begins. 5 pages before that's shown that. But when the value of that life begins to outweigh other considerations, such as the health or even the happiness of the mother. I'm not just talking about the health of the mother. It's a propaganda line. Or even the happiness of the mother. Listen, spell that out. It means that the mother, for her own hedonistic happiness, selfish happiness, can take human life by her choice, by law. Do you understand what I've said? By law, on the basis of her individual choice of what makes her happy, she can take what has been declared to be, in the first 5 pages, to be, without any question, human life. In other words, they acknowledge the human life is there, but it's an open question to whether it is not right to kill that human life if it makes the mother unhappily, and basically that is no different than Stalin, Mao, or Hitler killing who he killed for what he conceived to be the good of society. There is absolutely no line between the two statements. No absolute line whatsoever. One follows along. Once it is from the other. Once it is acknowledged that it is human life that is involved, and as I've said, this issue in Newsweek shows conclusively that it is. Once it is acknowledged that it is human life that is involved, the acceptance of the death of human life in babies, born or unborn, opens the door to the arbitrary taking of any human life. From then on, it's purely arbitrary. It's purely arbitrary. It was this view that opened the door to all that followed in Germany prior to Hitler. It's an interesting factor that the only Supreme Court in the Western world that has ruled against easy abortion is the West German Supreme Court. And the reason they did it is because they knew, and it's clear history, that this view of human life in the medical profession and the legal profession combined, before Hitler came on the scene, is what opened the way for everything that happened in Hitler's Germany. And so the German Supreme Court has voted against easy abortion because they know very well where it leads.
So we see the dangers of this Humanist Manifesto, which is a totally illogical, totally useless, actually, document. It isn't worth the paper it's written on. It sounds good, but it is garbage in and garbage out. The 6th item in the Humanist Manifesto states that working to benefit society maximizes individual happiness. And that again is true, but it makes assumptions that there is a meta-narrative whereby it is good to benefit human society. But in evolution, which is an unguided process, such a meta-narrative does not exist. Again, these atheists are stealing from the Christian theistic worldview to write. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we cannot emphasize this too much, a document, which is the Secular Humanist Manifesto 3, the third version of it, which makes no sense at all, which has not been examined. It is not examined in the public square. It's not examined in schools. The population doesn't examine it. But there are persons, particularly persons in the judiciary. And here we go back to Justice Kenneth Benjamin in Belize, Justice Devendra Rampersad in Trinidad and Tobago, and in other places. We will be seeing justices in India in a short while beginning to use their power to implement this, the implications of this manifesto. Again, we are not saying that people get together in a room and say we're going to do this, but we are saying this has become a part of the culture of education, the culture of law, the culture of medicine, and it makes no sense whatsoever as the culture of politics. We have the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Hussein, saying that Trinidad and Tobago is a secular society. So here we have garbage in and garbage out in our legal, our medical, in our educational profession. It is time we in the Caribbean bring an end to this nonsense. This garbage must not be a part of public life.
Policy. Untested
in the Caribbean.
And unchallenged.
Unchallenged. Anybody who wants to bring it to the Caribbean, the judges who wish to bring it here,
tested and challenged.
They must be challenged in the public square. We must not allow Justice Devendra Rampersad, Justice Kenneth Benjamin, and Attorney General Hussein to impose this garbage on our population. It stops here.
Right. No, so we have looked today at the implications of the secular humanist worldview. We have seen that the foundations are flawed. Yeah. And if these foundations are flawed, the building cannot stand. Yeah. The reason why it has stood for so long, the reason why it is impacting all our lives to a greater or lesser degree, is that it has been untested, unchallenged, and a largely sleeping population. Yeah. Schaefer said this in America, a largely dormant population, and he especially blamed a dormant church who looked for blessing but did not look to make Jesus Christ Lord and to be salt and light in the population. He blamed them largely for this, and a largely dormant population has allowed it to remain untested and unchallenged and to seep into all the areas of our lives. Yes. This is what we've done. And Schaefer, in the next show, we're going to start out by showing you how Schaefer says all minority groups are at risk from this kind of thinking. You know, so you may think that for now it suits their purpose, but eventually the group in power can apply the same rules to any minority group, to any powerless group. It may be the unborn child today, but it may be the black person tomorrow, or the Muslim, or the whoever, or the disabled. Well, it's already disabled, the wholly infirm, the unborn, but it may be another group tomorrow. And so people who call themselves fighting for civil liberties should not be fighting to implement this kind of worldview, because it will eventually, it has the potential to erode the civil liberties of anyone and everyone. So Francis Schaefer will talk about that when we open the next segment to talk about the Christian Manifesto, the counterpoint to the secular humanist.
How to handle this garbage. So this has been the Issachar Hour. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to being with you.
Please remember to send us your feedback. We so appreciate the feedback we've had so far on the recent programs. Please continue to send feedback. It doesn't have to be positive feedback. We appreciate all feedback about the show. We appreciate it. We thank you for being with us. Thank you for watching the Issachar Hour. And please join us again for the next show. Thank you so much.